want to try and sneak in this phone call from Chris in the UK, who wants to talk more about this idea of healthfulness around the sissy fantasy. I mean, Chris, what's on your mind tonight?
Yeah, it's the sort of BDSM humiliation play, something that I've been curious about for a while. But such a lot of it, as he discussed earlier, is regarding humiliating or degrading people for having feminine characteristics or whatever, and that's something I'm not at all comfortable with on there. So I was just wondering if you thought would humiliation play sort of centered around the fear of being seen as feminine or sissy be more healthy?
Yeah, if you ask somebody the direct question, is it healthy to get hit in the face? I think we all would kind of universally be like, no, like it causes tissue damage at a minimum. Like, no. But I also think that there are absolutely healthy and enjoyable, and not just like, in the sense that you can eat a couple of hot dogs and you'll still be okay. I think you can actually find real, sincere health and fulfillment through BDSM. And I think that humiliation can be a part of that. Now, we don't want to be hit too hard. We don't want to be hit too often. We don't want to be hit in ways that we aren't like psychologically or physically prepared for. But is it healthy? It certainly can be. And I'm not entirely sure where those lines are, but I think it's going to be kind of different for each person. Does that sound fair to the two of you?
Yeah, and I would tell you, if that's something you're interested in, that you should find someone and develop a relationship with them. Like someone you trust, and develop a relationship with them, and look for someone who has experience in that, and someone that you feel like you can communicate with openly and honestly, and who's listening to you.
Mm-hmm. Wherever you draw that line for yourself, you want to be with a partner who's going to honor that line and maybe see the need and the strong emotions and everything else attached to it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, how did all of that strike you? Does any of that feel uncomfortable or exciting or challenging?
No, it was. I'm not sure if I expressed how clearly I expressed the question. It was given sort of the issues you discussed earlier in the show around humiliation centered on centered on female characteristics, and that is something that is implying that women are somehow lesser.
Sure.
Would those same issues apply to, say, maybe humiliation centered around sort of the toxic fear of being perceived as feminine? Suffer those same issues?
Yeah, a lot of the content in this area does have a like deeply misogynistic or sort of transphobic bent or lean to it. And I definitely recognize, like Summer was saying earlier, that can be remarkably problematic. I don't know that I'm necessarily comfortable with saying universally that is unhealthy or bad content. I do think that maybe we could, as a society, be a little bit more mindful, certainly in some of the terminology that we use and in some of the framework. And I also think that it's potentially telling that there is a sort of very specific brand of toxicity that seems to get replicated over and over and over. But I don't know that I feel at all comfortable saying that it's universally unhealthy or bad to involve humiliation around some of these things. I mean, do y'all feel that that's true?
I would agree with you, and I just want to throw out that while I personally, I'm not going to degrade someone on the basis of being feminine or effeminate, because I'm uncomfortable with that that doesn't mean that it's not an okay thing to like do exploration around, just because it's something that I'm saying like you should evaluate and maybe evaluate your attitudes and ideas on. Just because you're saying like I should evaluate my ideas and attitudes on and think about how I feel about this doesn't mean you shouldn't participate in the play either. Like, but it is something to like think about and ask yourself, like, do I feel that like women are lesser, or that like it's okay to degrade someone on this basis? Do I actually feel that way? Is that something I'm actually experiencing and believe? Or is this something that's about fun? And if the question is the latter, then like go for it. But it's also important like to evaluate in power play structures in BDSM. I think it's also okay to be like evaluating what this is and what you're doing at the same time. Ask yourself questions and evaluate yourself.
Yeah, like be curious about, like, if you have a fetish or a fantasy, I think being curious about why you have that is a great place to start. Like, just to be like, I noticed that I like this and this and this. What about my history? What about my current situation? You know, makes that exciting for me, or makes that a turn on for me. And then, you know, whatever answer you come up with, I mean, it is what it is. But I think it is important to think about, you know, why we have the fantasies that we have, maybe.
Sure.
And especially when they're a little bit transgressive like this, you know, you should, hopefully you can compartmentalize a little bit as far as, this is my fantasy world, and I understand why this turns me on. And when I'm in this play space, this is fun for me. But when I go out into the world, then maybe I want to do extra for women or something, you know, like because perhaps then you're getting a little perspective that you've never had before, of maybe what it's like to be a woman in this world. So, and I think too, sometimes, as we know, that BDSM for sure is very therapeutic for some people, whether it's the physical, like whether it's actually like impact play, or fantasy, like what we're talking about. You know, people can process through this stuff. They can process their traumas in these ways and like come out more understanding and better on the other side of it. So I think there's a lot of variance and nuance to all of this.
Yeah. do your real world work, right? Like be responsible to be self-aware, to be you know, deconstructing toxic structures, and to be aware of like the moral and ethical ways that you navigate the world, but also have your play space. You know, when you're playing, play and do that however you need to, however you want to. How does all that strike you, Chris?
Yeah, that was very interesting. Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, well, glad to hear from you tonight. Anything else on your mind before we let you go?
Not for tonight.
All right. Well, you take care. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, this is a really tricky space because it is transgressive, and I think that is something that will always be true on a certain level. You know, definitely, I'd like to live in a world that's a little bit more gender affirming, that is a little bit more open and available to people of different stripes and different strokes. But I do believe in that idea of play as a way of working out some of our fears, some of our uncomfortableness. And so that is going to be a transgressive act on some level. And I think that may always be true to an extent.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about BDSM, like in some of these ways, like, I mean, okay, you could ask yourself questions like, well, is it okay to like tie up a woman and like hit her? That's crazy. I mean, violence against women is incredibly real. Like lots of women face domestic violence. Like many people face sexual assault violence. That's incredibly real. How could somebody want something like that? I mean, that's, you know, these structures of violence are real. Well, this is not real.
Yeah,
I want to push this over here. Like this is
not real.
Yeah, this isn't real. And I think it would be okay to ask yourself, like, why do I want to involve myself in this? And is like, you know, I don't really have a desire to harm people, right? Like, and at the same time, like knowing that and holding on to that, and also being like, and like in this space, maybe there are things that I would like to do, and maybe there are things that I would like to play with in a consensual way that are helpful. And I would tell you on a personal level, like allowing someone to touch me in those ways when I've consented to that consensually, when I've said, oh yes, this is what I want, yes, I want this, like very, very vocally with somebody else, and giving them that control is incredibly, and has been incredibly healing for me personally.
Yeah, no, consensual non-consent is not like semi-consent. It is consent, right?
Consent.
Like, and I think that we can socially kind of lose the thread on that, or maybe let those things blend together in our minds in ways that we shouldn't.
I think it's because people have this like really tough time with consent for some reason.
Yeah, it's almost as if we're not even teaching children about sex, and then they're just growing up and then getting married and having to try it for the first time, wink, wink, and it's just not working out so great. I don't understand where all that's coming from.
Yeah, wild.